Welcome back to the Sharpest College Football Podcast. This is BuckMetrics, as usual, with Robert Martin. This is our catch up where we're going over, off-season developments in the world of college football. Robert, as we kick off usual actual dynamic content. Now that we've gotten our refresher in the past. Couple things, just one of the off-season developments, if I might brag about you a little bit. For those of you who might or might not know, earlier this year there was an election in Canada. Our co-host here, Robert, is a political pollster in Canada, and Robert's polling was the most accurate in the Canadian election. Congratulations to you on that, Robert.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was a crazy election. It was a long we did for our company. I'm just clarifying, I'm not the owner of the company, but I am the one who does the polling and a lot of the weighting and the data analysis. We did a daily tracker. So every single day we did a poll. And in Canada, unlike the US, we have 36 days for the election, not the I think roughly million days that the US has an election going on for. But no, we did a poll every single day. And yeah, it's a lot of data and you have to follow it and you have to be on top of it and be like, this is what the data's saying, this is how it's moving and stuff. And the same way we experience here, right? There was many times when people on Twitter got very mad at me and us. And there's times when people were very happy with us and me on Twitter. So it comes and goes. But no, honestly, it felt really good to be number one in Canada and basically to bring it home. It's your home turf, home country. It feels good to be number one there. So yeah, that was really great. Yeah.
Yeah, also on the topic of one's nation, since I last saw our listeners, viewers, whatever we refer to them, my wife got her American citizenship. Was not easy, but we made it over the finish line. Thank goodness for that. But back to the Canadian thing, just to get the annual Canadian thing out of the way. I actually read that Canadians are not naturally nice, but in high school there's a required course called HTBN. Is that correct?
HTBN. What's that? What's that
It's it
stand
how to be nice. I thought that was like a requirement for graduation. Is that not
for? We have like community service you have to do and like civics and stuff. But
okay?
yeah,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like that. No, Canadians are generally nice, and I would say that you do learn that through school. Teachers generally are like, yeah, be nice to each other, and they teach that stuff. So yeah, I'd say Canadians are generally pretty nice. Yeah.
They are. I actually had the pleasure of visiting your fine country up to where did I go?
Calgary.
Calgary.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, that's how you say it. Calgary?
Calgary. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, not to be too mean, but yeah, a part of Canada for now, I guess we can say, right?
Yeah, there probably actually will be a referendum at some point in Calgary, in the province of Alberta, to leave the country or not. I don't think they're going to win to leave, but it's possible. You never know.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of oil talk, a lot of energy talk up there. That's what they do, pretty much, I guess. All right, enough of that. Off-season developments. I will start with, and you're probably wondering, what the heck is this? One lesson I learned in the off season: do not shop on Amazon when it's dark on a weekend. We'll just say that, because what is the risk, Robert? It is not having a fine T-shirt like this for our beloved Kennesaw State Owls. The real risk is winding up with two T-shirts like that. Don't want to do that. I'd like to say lesson learned, but I'm suddenly sitting on 50 tins of cigars that I don't need right now, so I'm still working through this one.
I will say that I never was a huge Amazon person until into the pandemic. I would always be like, yeah, just go buy it in a store. But honestly, Amazon has been so huge. It's just so convenient for a lot of stuff. So yeah, but there is dangers to Amazon. There's dangers of buying too much stuff, and you're like, oh, now I have a billion of this. It's just yeah, it's
Yes,
there's always risks of that. Yeah,
or two Kennesaw State T-shirts. All
yeah,
right, we are going to begin where we both left off last season slash began last season. So when we were looking at our preview for the 2024 season, you might remember this graphic. We were trying to decide who would get not their, but the first playoff win of the 2024 season in the expanded format. Pretty sure neither of us had the answer, which is James Franklin. Also winning was Mr. Sarkeesian here. This graphic was not in last year's. Was not in last year's preview. This is just, Sark's got to do better with the hair here. He's recruiting young kids, and he's got this. Do you know what Kewpie is?
no, what is that?
Yeah, it's a Japanese brand of mayonnaise. And
His hair
all
does look
right, now
like
you can
that.
see it. Yeah, it does. He's got to do better, just to relate to the 19 and 18-year-old kids. So yeah, we both whiffed on that. I think the consensus was Dan Lanning, although that was a little bit of a trick question because he did
Yeah,
wind up having a bye. Pretty interesting. Funny to see a couple of guys on here and how the seasons really did not go, namely this guy and this guy for different reasons. But yeah, I'm going to pose the question a little bit different now that we've got the first expanded playoff win. I'm going to say who gets their first playoff win in 2025. And so it can be more than one. So I've got Dan Lanning, I've got Lincoln Riley, I've got Mario, I've got John Summerall here. John Summerall is going to be pretty prominent in the preseason here. Billy Napier, I've got Brent Venables, Lane Kiffin, Sharon Moore, Kurt Signetti, Kenny Dillingham, and Josh Heupel. All right, let's go one by one. I'm pretty positive on Lanning unless he makes the stupid mistake of winning the conference again. Boy, that was dumb. I think that's, I wouldn't say safe bet, but confidence level high. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, it was again, to be fair, fixed it now so that it won't matter. But imagine, because obviously these guys are like master tacticians, and imagine like after being like, we should have lost to Penn State. We should have just
Yep.
gone to that game strategically. We should have just taken a knee, lost the game, and then we would have been fine. We could have won the whole thing had we done that. No, I mean, it's insane. That was insane. And it's like the team you beat had a far easier path. They got what? They got SMU first, and SMU
Yeah.
literally gave them the win. Literally, I think what, two or three interceptions in that game,
Yeah.
just straight up. Then after that, they got, was it Notre Dame? And then Notre Dame took them out, I think, right? Yeah, it was Notre Dame took them out, I think, in one of the Sugar Bowl, I want to say. No, that was
Yes.
Georgia. Oh no, they got Boise State again. They got
Yeah.
another.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got
That's
Boise
right.
State again. Yeah, so it's just, you get like the ACC team that I guess should have been the 4 seed or something. I don't know. It was dumb. But then you get the team that was arguably the worst team in the entire field, and then you go get crushed by Notre Dame in the, or
Mhm.
yeah, then yeah, no, it was Notre Dame, I think. Then yeah, in
Yep.
the semifinal. And it was just, you feel bad for Dan Lanning. And obviously, Oregon did not have a good game there in the Rose Bowl. That was horrible. They got absolutely crushed. Didn't even feel like they were completely prepared. But that Ohio State team they ran over Tennessee. They ran over Oregon again. They had a competitive game against Texas, but they still took them out by 2 touchdowns. And then they didn't lose. They didn't lose. They covered the spread in all 4 of their playoff games. Like, clearly they were on a wrecking path after they lost to Michigan. So
Yeah. Yeah.
this is the thing where it's okay, he didn't win a playoff game, asterisk, but it's like he should have won a playoff game and he'd been able to play Boise State. Let him play Boise State. There you go. Done. We're done. We're not having this conversation anymore. If they play Boise State or if they play SMU or even Clemson or some of the other teams. No, that one's kind of dumb. I will say that, like, you could, obviously it's not, but you could argue Sharon Moore, I think, yeah,
Yeah.
of Michigan. You could argue that was a playoff win. The SEC people are going to argue it wasn't a playoff win, but I'm going to argue it was. Like, the thing is, it's like they were, what, 16-point underdogs to Alabama, and they won outright in a dominant fashion. That's a pretty good result there for that. I was very impressed with that. And first of all, I bet on Michigan in that game. I won money from that game. It was funny, that game, I was sitting in a passport office because I had to renew my passport. And I was watching that game, and I'm like, wow, really well in this. But this is the thing. I bet on them in that game to win. And I bet them as an underdog, a massive underdog. I'm like, maybe they'll keep it competitive, but I put some money on them to win it. They not only did they win it, they dominated. I thought they could win that game, and I was impressed by how much they won that game. That's how dominant they were in that game. So I think, like, the Big Ten is going to be very tricky. Obviously, Ohio State is still there. Obviously, Oregon is still there. Obviously, Penn State is still there. But then the fourth team, you've got like a Michigan, you've got a Nebraska. Some people are talking about Illinois. I think we're just a little too early in Illinois. Indiana obviously needs to be in that conversation, but are they good enough to repeat again? Like, this is the question, but I think there's definitely a spot in there for Michigan. If
Wow.
the thing is that this is funny, right? Because you and I were both here. I remember about this time last year, I got Michigan at minus 110 to not make the playoff. And I loved that line, and I just hammered it. And that was completely right. That was completely the right play. Didn't even get close. Didn't even get close to getting to the playoff. Not even close. But, and I think their over under was, I think, what, 8.5 or something like that? Or no, it's higher. I remember betting I think I bet their season win total under. I can't remember.
I think it
But
was 8.5 or 9 sounds right because
yeah,
there was a presumption that they would, I would say, that they would be a playoff contender.
yeah, and they weren't, right? Because that's when the minus 110 to not make the playoffs. And the thing is, I made that bet. It was a great bet. it paid off. But honestly, they lost. Like, how many times did they lose a one-score game? Like, I think most of the losses were by like one score, like a touchdown or a field goal here or something like that. Like, yeah, they lost games, but they were very close, closer than we would have thought based on how much that program lost in just that 1 year. And honestly, you bookend that with how well they did in Alabama against Alabama there in whatever bowl that was. I want to say it was the Outback Bowl, but I have no idea. That's a pretty tempting, like, that's an intriguing team. And the fact that they apparently can just beat Ohio State whenever they want to, pretty sounds like a pretty good option to get to the playoffs.
How about to get to get his first playoff win? Do you
Yeah,
think they're
if he
wow?
gets to the playoffs, he'll get a win. Yeah, they'll get a win.
Oh my God. Okay. Wow. I strong disagree there, but we can get to that in the Big Ten preview. I want to do this guy
Hmm.
together because I think they're weirdly. I think they're the same in that I want to say no but for both of these guys. I think it's more likely that neither team makes the playoff. There's just a lot of ground for USC to make up on offense, the wide receiver defense, pardon me, and the wide receiver depth is not what it usually is. It's almost like a running theme here with Oklahoma that I'm very confident that that defense will never have problems under Venables. That offense was absolutely killed with injuries to the offensive line and wide receivers. They bring in John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle. And so I look at it this way. I think it's more likely than not that both those teams don't make the playoff. But this is why I love the offseason of horse racing. I think that if the things fall into place and USC has a defense that's good enough to get them to the playoffs, and if John Mateer and Ben Arbuckle are good enough on offense for Oklahoma, these two teams definitely will be able to win a playoff game if they're good enough to get there. If that makes sense, they're not sliding in that. Those are both the teams that you don't want to face.
Yeah, I would say I believe Lincoln Riley a little bit more than Brent Venables. I like if you said -110 each way, who gets it first? I'd say Lincoln Riley. I It doesn't make sense to say it, but I think it's harder to get out of the SEC than to get out of the Big Ten for the playoffs. Although I feel like Oklahoma is just a more average SEC team, and I think USC is an above average Big Ten team. But I think it's just like you have to play like the top, like you have to somehow get ahead of an Oregon or an Ohio State or a Penn State and a Michigan. And it's like those are the top teams in the league. The SEC is more equal, but it's just okay. We have to get past Georgia and Texas and Florida and Alabama and Ole Miss and whoever, like whatever, and Tennessee and whoever else. It's just, I just feel like there's just not, and there are so many good SEC teams that like I just don't think, or I don't think Oklahoma's going to be better than the fifth or sixth best SEC team. And I think USC has a better chance of being the fourth best Big Ten team than Oklahoma does of being the fourth best SEC team. That's what I think. And if they can get into the playoffs,
Yeah,
I think that could they get the playoffs. Sure, they can either of them could win. But I don't like based on Oklahoma's performance last year. I just don't think Mateer is a big enough upgrade to get there.
it's one of the biggest storylines I think in the SEC. That's one of the most fascinating things to me is Ben Arbuckle. Oh, we'll get to that later. Ben Arbuckle going there is a fascinating thing. All right, just for a million reasons, the default answer for Mario is no, because the playoffs are where Mario's almost bound to do a Mario thing, right?
It's I like here's obviously we'll talk about Mario Cristobal because obviously that's the in the podcast for those who are new we talk about him a lot for many different reasons.
Yes.
But the thing is that I don't know why people are even seriously considering Miami this year. The
Uh oh.
only
Uh
what
oh. We might have some contention in the ACC preview.
oh
Let's just
okay
say that.
the only reason Miami was in any of those games last year was just straight up Cam Ward. There's
Mhm.
no doubt in my. There's the only reason they were even remotely competitive. That's the only reason they even remotely got to the playoff was because of Cam Ward. Just straight up end sentence there, done. You take him away and you replace him with a quarterback who, in many cases, was definitely holding Georgia back, and now they're going to make the playoff.
See, that's there's like a little kind of storyline here that I need to entangle on that. And we have a different co-host or guest analyst for the SEC preview who actually is a Georgia guy, which is going to be fascinating because the Georgia narrative, I think, informed the Georgia narrative of 20 what happened in 23 and 24 informs Miami of 25. And
Mm.
I can go either way. And I'll just say this, I'm glad that we're going to talk to him about that before I go to Las Vegas and make my preseason season total win and conference champ bets. So the subtext to this one too is the whole Clemson thing. And I'm Clemson is flashing some signs that I've seen like before and not in a great way. I'll just put it that way. So ACC preview is going to be a lot more interesting than usual, I think, just based on just what two of the top three, let's say, because SMU should still be good too. And I didn't put Rhett Lashley on here because I ran out of space and because I wanted to put this guy in, John Summerall. Maybe a stretch here, maybe. Oh, he's been a head coach for 3 seasons, and he has how many conference titles? Three. Two at Troy after taking over for the horrible Chip Lindsey. Then he took over for the great Willie Fritz and immediately wins the. Or no, he didn't win the American. That's right, Army. They lost to Army, right? I think they lost to Army in the title game. So sorry.
I think so, yeah.
Two. But he did that with a freshman quarterback too. Now, unfortunately, that guy went to Duke. But Summerall is just a proven entity, man. Really good coach. And we're gonna have later on. We're gonna have a separate episode where we talk about what is a good coach today. And I think he's in that discussion in terms of just naturally a good coach. Maybe a little bit of a stretch. I think that there's some kind of just default gravitational pull to Boise in terms of who's going to get the G5 bid in every preseason until something's proven differently. But as a coach, I like Summerall better. Is it likely? No, but I think I'll put it this way. I think that right now he's the top of my list for first G5 coach to get a playoff win. Now he's probably going to be picked off by an SEC team soon, but I don't know. That's my take. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'd say he probably, again, in making the playoffs, he probably would have a better chance than Boise. Again, Boise State, I think, is similar to. There's a couple of teams that I think are similar to the problem that Miami has, where it's like this one player was everything. They are gone now. What are you
Mm-hmm.
going to do? And that obviously for Boise was Ashton Jainty, who won the Heisman again because I apparently don't understand how the rules of Heisman work. But some for the it's so frustrating. I'm able to nail like NFL MVP and other stuff, but like Heisman, I just can't for some reason. I don't understand why. But anyways, and you go back to our old podcast where I'll rant about this doesn't make any sense. This person should win it, and they just don't because of the imaginary rules that they make up whenever they feel like it. But no, the thing is it's like how many times, like if you go back in the history of the playoff, how many times would that G5 team have been the same? I don't think it would have been many. I think basically what you're looking for a G5 team to get in is having like a really good first round draft pick that can carry the team, whether or not that be a quarterback or running back or some sort of skill position player. And then that basically gets you to be either undefeated or one loss through your entire schedule, and then you just win the conference championship, and then you're in by default because you have the best strength of schedule. And I think, or the best record, right? The best, whatever
Yeah.
ESPN wants to call that now. You had the least amount of losses. And I think that if you're able to do that, right, and there has to be a G5 team in the college football playoff because of antitrust reasons, then yeah, I think he's got a good shot. I think honestly, I like it was in the game with Boise State. Penn State just shut down J&T, and then that was it. That was it. It was done. They couldn't get past that because they just couldn't throw the ball enough, and they definitely couldn't stop Penn State on defense. They tried, and they were not horrible at it, but they just long term enough they couldn't stop it. But if
Yeah.
you're actually building a team that can compete, which he can do there at Tulane, there's a shot there. And I think they'd be a much more complete team than a Boise State, where it's not just stop this one guy from running the ball and we could beat them. So I think he would definitely have a much better shot than that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Next, Billy Napier. Boy, we did not expect to be having this discussion at this point, but you know what? And I'm going to say, I probably, even more than you, I pointed out that he got screwed continually at the quarterback position. Just the big thing with the collective screwing up the Jaden Rashada situation, and then you get stuck with Graham Mertz. I really felt bad for you when that was announced as a Gator fan, but now he's got a guy. they need to improve on defense, but I put that in the Riley and Venables thing where it's like, if they have enough of a defense to make the playoff, I can see them very much winning a playoff game.
It's possible. I will say though that, and I know everybody's focusing on DJ Lagway, and he did look good in those couple of games. But I will say though that like this has very similar vibes to me for the Anthony Richardson thing, where he's oh my god, this is a great quarterback and he's so
Oh,
great and
come
all that.
on.
It reminds me a little bit of
Go
that.
go
It
ahead.
reminds me a little bit of that. It does.
I'm not a quarterback coach, but as a fan of people who throw the ball, I think that there's one of those guys can throw the ball, and one is just like Jalen Milrow as like a high school sophomore. Okay, totally different. Lagway, I think, is so much better with the ball. Let me ask you two questions about this. It's interesting. So, who would you say is more likely to get their first playoff win this season? Napier or Moore? It sounds like you're saying Moore, huh?
Yeah, I think more because we know they're going to have a good defense, right? Like that's
Yeah,
the thing.
yeah, fair. Yeah, it. What do they get out of Bryce Underwood? There's a whole nother fascinating discussion about Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Is their offense was so mediocre last year. Now, how much of that is because they had to play basically with one leg chopped off offensively every week because their quarterback position was so bad? And does that make it totally different? Possibly.
But yeah, see, that's the thing, right? If you had told me, if you had said before the season started and we had done the previews, if you had said Michigan's going to go 6-6 this year, I'd be like, yeah, I see it, and I would not have been surprised. I think a lot of people would have been surprised had you said 6-6, had someone said they're going to go 6-6, but I wouldn't have been because they lost so much. Like literally, they lost their running back, they lost their quarterback, they lost their head coach, they lost a ton of pieces on defense, a ton of other pieces. Like they lost so much stuff, and people were like, oh no, Shamar Moore's a good coach, and there's just more. But I'm like, there isn't, and I think that the fact that they didn't go like 6-6 and were like 8-4, it's a testament to like how good this team like actually is, and the fact that even in those four losses, it's like they lost by a field goal, they lost by a touchdown. Like these weren't blowout losses, and I think that alone says, hey, this guy might actually know what he's doing. And if you actually give them an offense, like again, how many times did they lose like 20-17? Right? If you're holding like a USC to 20 points, or you're holding some of these other teams to 20 points, if you can just get an offense that's not horrible, then you can win that. You can win that game. And I think that's
Yeah.
what I think people are underestimating in that case. Florida will be Florida. They have some pieces. I just the thing is, it's like 100%. They will have to go up against tough teams. They're gonna have to play Georgia. They're gonna have to play Tennessee. They can win some of those games, and that's fine. And DJ Lagway could be really good. I still haven't seen quite enough yet. But again, it's I throw around Anthony Richardson because everybody was super hyped about Richardson going into that season, and then he was just mediocre, and he ended up getting Dan Mullen fired, if I remember correctly. And that's the thing, right? It's I've seen the hype for a quarterback where people are like, oh, he's mobile and can throw. Now I definitely think Legway's probably better than Richardson, and Richardson continues to not be good in the NFL. But
Yes.
this is the thing, right? It's where would I rather place the bet? And I think I'd rather place the bet on Michigan because I think with Michigan, you're basically relying on them to win 2 out of 3 tough games. But for Florida, it's like you have to win 6 out of 8 tough games, and you don't know like the difference between the sixth toughest game in that, like the hardest game in that, and like the easiest game in that is a lot smaller than say for Michigan, right? Because Michigan gets to go beat up on like, Purdue or something, but Florida is like, oh, you have to play South Carolina or some
Yeah.
like the worst SEC team is a lot closer to the top SEC team than the top Big Ten team is to the bottom Big Ten team. Like the Big Ten is like a bunch of teams at a few teams at the top, and then just like a massive gap between the other teams. But the SEC is okay, yeah, a couple teams at the top, but then also that bottom is a lot closer to that top, and that's where when you're playing, that's one of the reasons why they only had 3 teams last year, and why I think getting having have a win is not a guarantee. Any SEC team is not a guarantee this year.
Yeah. Three things about the Florida, Michigan, or Florida, and then we'll move on. But I got to say, do we know Sharon Moore's a good coach for sure? It's very different to rebuild after a Jim Harbaugh leaves and a lot of those guys leave. Billy Napier, it's easy to forget now because he struggled at Florida. I mean, he was awesome at then Louisiana Lafayette. I mean, he was really good, and he was a little overdue to get an SEC job. When you say, oh, you've heard hype about, he's mobile and he can throw, about Lagway, well, that's exactly what they're saying about the Michigan quarterback too, Underwood. To be determined. The last thing about Lagway, and this is the last either or, but I think this is really fascinating because you said something. You said in those games he looked good. We heard that about somebody else, and this is where I take issue, and I always push back my Longhorn buddy at the gym, Jeremy at Equinox. Jesus, it's Longhorns every time I talk to him. Would you rather? Who do you believe more in at this point as a SEC quarterback, DJ Lagway or Arch Manning? Remember who Manning's
Yeah,
played, and Lagway's had a very different experience so far in terms of opponents.
yeah, no, that is true. I think Legway has more experience, but I think
But
see
Coach
it's
Cupid's a better offensive guy too, though, right?
this is the thing, and it's like I've actually already bet for some of the preseason bets I've had. I'm sure we're gonna get into this in the we talked about the SEC. I've actually already bet Archie Manning Heisman, Archie Manning first overall pick for next year. I actually got
Okay. Yeah.
there was an insane like 70% bonus boost for something. So like I have him at 3-1 to be the first overall pick next year. So that was a great. I took advantage of a boost for that. But notice how I said Heisman and first overall pick. What did I not say? Texas to win the SEC,
Yeah.
Texas to win the national. See, I didn't say those because I don't want to bet those because I think that at some point Sark will stop them from they come in the SEC. But I don't think Sark is strong enough and is good enough of a coach to get them to that point. Now that being said, if Archie Manning is by far the best quarterback in all of college football going into the SEC championship game, Archie Manning's still going to win the Heisman. That's not a good thing. But could I 100% see Sarkisian blowing another SEC game against Georgia, literally Georgia again, who they've lost to now? They lost to twice last season. I could see that. I will say that Manning, when he came into those games, he gave Texas something that Quinn Ewers couldn't have. But, and this is the big kind of but that I'm sure a lot of people are questioning, and I've heard this question a couple times, is if Manning was that good, why didn't you play him? Why didn't he go? Why didn't he play in the SEC championship game against Georgia if he was that good? Why didn't he go in against Ohio State in the semifinals? If he was that good and you knew he was better, that much better than Quinn Ewers, who was like I think a fifth round pick or something, he got crushed by the NFL draft. If he was that good, why didn't he go into those games? Why was he playing in those games? And I think fundamentally that's the question that a lot of people don't have answers to. I think it was some sort of because a lot of these coaches have the like you don't change your quarterbacks, like you have one quarterback and that's it. Two quarterbacks is no quarterbacks. And I think that kind of Sarkisian just wanted to say whatever. He's gone next year anyways, and he didn't want to kill because if you pull him and you put in Archie Manning, then Ewers goes undrafted, right? Like what NFL team is going to take him? Not even as a developmental quarterback or a back quarterback. He's not even getting drafted, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, some people would say, okay, why would you kill your season for that? But at the same time, this guy he's been the quarterback for Texas for what 4 years now. So almost the entire, I think basically the entire time Sark's been there, basically, and he wasn't horrible. He just wasn't as good. He didn't give the offense the kind of dynamicism that it needed. I think Archie Manning is better than Legway, but we'll get to see them this year. We'll get to see that soon. But this is the thing. I think I'd rather be holding a Archie Manning Heisman ticket than a Legway Heisman ticket.
Fair. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Yep. There is no right or wrong answer. Okay. Got to bring him up. Lane Kiffin. What do you think? It
He
seems like
does.
last year was their year, right? They lost a lot.
Yeah, they did lose a lot. He keeps getting better, right? Just a couple of years ago, this was a team that like and it's insane how far we've come now with this. Because I remember a couple of years ago, they were like 3-point three scored underdogs to the Nick Saban Alabama team, and they weren't even close. And this is the thing, right? It's like he's gotten better. I remember in that game that was with God, Matt Corral, I think it was, versus Bryce Young. They've come so far, and he's closed the gap to the top of the SEC so much since then. And like in that game, he was so aggressive, going for it fourth down, they going for it on fourth downs. They had no business going for it all, just being super aggressive. And he's definitely come down a lot in that. But they lost games last year they should have won. And had they won those games, had they not blown some of those games, they would have been in the playoff. They 100% would have been in the playoff. It wouldn't have been a question. And this is the thing where I think fundamentally they that was probably their shot, right? Their quarterback is now in the NFL. This might be a bit of a rebuilding year for Ole Miss, but they will be back at some point. But yeah, I don't think this is Ole Miss's year.
Yeah, the other thing too is a new quarterback there, and he seems to do a lot better in the second year plus of his quarterbacks under him. There seems to be a learning curve with his quarterbacks under him. All right, controversial one, Signetti.
Yeah, there's a couple of times when a coach is just broken out, and we've seen it with him, and we saw it with I can't remember what was the name of the Arkansas coach, was it Pitfield or something?
Pittman.
Pittman, yeah. He had a breakout year and he had 9 or 10 wins, and then he started sliding back to there's every once in a while a head coach will come out and have this breakout year. And I'm not expecting Indiana to be bad. Again, I think they are going to be the same position they were last year, where they are not as good as the best Big Ten teams, but they're better than all the other Big Ten teams. And I think there's that point where they're like, okay, we're better than most of the league, but we're not better than the Ohio State, than the Oregon, then et cetera. And I think that's where Indiana is going to fit in nicely. They're going to fit right nicely in there. And does that mean they win 10 games or 9 games? I don't know, but that's the difference between going to the playoff or not, potentially, depending. So I think this year they might take a bit of a step back. I still expect him to be a good coach, but I don't. I think a lot of it was unexpected. I think a lot of people probably underprepared for Indiana this year, and I don't think that's going to happen again. I think now that they know what he wants to do in this offense, and a lot of these teams that either going to be played are the teams that are going to play that they played them last year, or they have tape on them from last year. They're going to know what they're going to have to be better prepared this year for that. So I think that probably gets them down to an 8-4 or something like that, and not in the playoffs this year. But long term, though, they still will be a pretty strong team here. So I think longer term, we'll have to see.
I'm more bullish here than you, and I'll give you just the Cliff's Notes version of it. Let's not forget that their starting quarterback, who wound up doing very well, was Curtis Rourke, who had an apex of 100 in the MAC the year before. So it's not like he had a quarterback that was anywhere close to what he has now with Fernando Mendoza coming in, who was far north of 100 in the ACC. I was looking back, that offensive line had 5 new starters last year. You're going to have a lot more continuity there. And you're looking at the same thing on defense, too. In Signetti, he won at FCS. I forget, did he go undefeated or did he go 11-1 in his first year at JMU as an FBS program? This guy's a made man to me. Maybe I'm just more bullish on him now. I think it's more likely than I think it's more likely that he doesn't win a playoff game this year than he does. I'd put him ahead of that Napier, Riley, Venables group for me. All right,
Yeah,
next one. I'm going to go off the map here with Kenny Dillingham. I'm going to say, and this is going to sound crazy, but when you're doing your March Madness bracket, and then you do your bracket, and then you're looking at, okay, what about bets to win the championship or make bets to win the national title? Considerations are obviously who's the best team, but then the second consideration is going to be who has the easiest path to the Final Four, who has an easy region, who has like a 2 and 3 and 4 seed that are overrated. I see Arizona State as so clearly the best team in the Big 12 that I think Oregon's not going to miss the playoff. That's just not going to happen. Look at the rest of these teams. I can definitely see the rest of them missing the playoff, except for Arizona State. I think Arizona State is the surest thing behind Oregon to make the playoffs here. So I have him high on this list. I don't want to spoil the Big 12 preview, but I put him way up there on in this list of coaches.
yeah, I agree. I think he is among the better coaches. I would just say that basically, I think you have to be careful with the Big Ten, the Big 12 just as a whole. I think it's just a meat grinder. Any team could beat any team on pretty much any given Saturday. Yes, I among the coaches that I would bet on, I think Dillingham is definitely one of the better ones. But I think in just in total, like you just have to. The Big 12 is so unpredictable, right? And it's just, oh yeah, you got a team, you were on the road, it was a bad week, you got caught on a road game in like BYU or somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and it's tough, right? It's very difficult, and I fundamentally think that it's just there's so much. I don't want to say luck because I believed it. Like Dillingham would not have gotten to where he got to, right, by basically picking off Texas, almost picking off Texas there in that bowl game as a 14 and a half point underdog. He would not have been there if just through 100% not through luck. But I think being consistently the best team in the Big 12 is impossible. I think it is far too variable. It's far too, it's just one bad game and all of a sudden you're not in the championship game. I think it's far too variable. And I think that any team that seems like they're a sure thing in the Big 12 it's wrong. You can't bet on the favorite in the Big 12. You have to bet on an underdog because something's always going to go wrong for everyone in the Big 12. This is the conference where they all beat each other up, and I think you can't just say okay, 'cause they are the favorite. I'm fairly sure right now, aren't they? I think he's the best coach in the Big 12, but is that
I
thing
don't.
that's going to determine or not?
Sorry. I don't think. I think Phil Steele has them like fifth or so.
Yeah, but I think the betting favorites. I think they are the betting favorite. I'm taken.
Are they? Come on, where are you? Wait, can you pull that up?
I will. Yeah,
Like,
you
like
continue. I will check that.
2022. Jeez. Here we go. Whoops.
Let's see. Big 12, Arizona State 550, coupled with Kansas State and Utah. Utah's 6-1 now.
Yeah.
I got them at
Uh,
20-1.
yeah, he's got them at fourth.
Yeah. Wow. So Utah's at. I got Utah at 20-1.
Yeah,
I.
let
I.
us.
Yeah. Utah's
I
massively charging up there. Yeah.
well, clearly we disagree on that. So Big 12 preview will be interesting. I've literally got some very strong feelings about Iowa State. All right. Lastly, just got to mention because he made the playoffs last year and they were a good, not excellent team. Josh Heupel. I think I'll put it this way. I don't think Nico leaving is a fatal is
No.
fatal. I think Nico leaving when he did is near fatal at the end of spring practice. That hurts a lot. So I think that it'll be a struggle just to make the playoff this year for Tennessee.
It's going to be tricky, right? I think as many people have pointed out, the first ever quarterback trade between them and UCLA. They literally traded quarterbacks.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's cool. Yeah, now that being said, though, his system, especially for quarterbacks, is very easy. It's very kind of plug and play. I think they will be a good team. The thing is that Nico had good moments, some good moments last year, but also some not good moments last year. So I'm a little indifferent. The thing is, if you have a guy who's paying me more money, or else I'm not playing for you, yeah, I don't think you really having getting rid of that person is not necessarily a bad thing. I would say. And again, the thing is, this is not like an athlete shouldn't be paid thing. I 100% agree, but you're already making a couple $1,000,000 here. If the line for you is no, it should be 4 million, not 2 million. Come on, like this is the problem here, right? Like you're playing for Tennessee, one of the in the best schools in the SEC, one of the biggest fan bases, and you're throwing it up for UCLA. Okay, yeah, it's beautiful out. Sorry, don't mean to trash
No,
California there, but
I don't think UCLA was Plan B. I think that was like Plan W.
because how many other passed on him when they realized that he was just chasing the money, right? That's what that was for. So no, I having someone like that off your team is not necessarily a negative. That being said, is Joey Aguilar an SEC quarterback? I don't think that.
That's
I don't think the market said that, so that's the
yeah,
thing, right? It's okay, I don't have a job, I'm gonna go on the portal. Oh look, Tennessee needs a quarterback now because of the guy who just replaced me. It'll be harder, but if it works, because he was the quarterback for App State and they did some
yeah,
stuff there with App State. So if they're able to figure it out, they could have some real fun there, but it's questionable at this point, yeah.
yeah. Yep, fair. All right, interesting discussion. Head coach moves. A lot going on here. The thing is, I was just putting this together. Not a lot of hires that I love, and maybe a lot of it is due to the fact that there's just been crazy turnover the last few years in the P5, and there was so few this year. I think maybe that's part of it. A lot of these guys I've had my eyes on to take the next step forward, like a Summerall. Just there weren't what right opportunities were not there for them. Let's just go over each category here. I love this hire, Rich Rod to West Virginia. I've done a 180 on my guy Charles Huff once he found a quarterback. Southern Miss, I think, got a steal there, and he brought. It's funny, Phil Steele in his preview said that I th- he's Phil Steele's words were, "I think that Southern Miss will have more players from last year's conference champion team than Marshall will." He brought that many guys with him. Like both of those, I think it's going to take Rich Rod, as is his want. It'll take him at least a year or so. That's a rough situation, but like both those hires, what do you think?
Yeah, a quick point. I'll talk about that in a second. A quick point about that. It's insane because that's a trend line with a lot of these, where a lot of these guys, and some of these other ones have it too, where like you're at one school, you go to another school, you bring 20 guys with you. It's insane. It's just like just taking a bus and just trekking everybody down there. It's crazy, but that's the way college football is now. And to be fair, if you've got your guys and you like your guys and you're like, hey, this guy is good, and you bring him, he's better, he's under, people are not valuing him, and other teams aren't valuing him that way, you bring him there. And the thing is, it's like you have familiarity, right? One of the big issues that a lot of these teams have had in the past is you bring in a new coach, they know none of the players, they have no idea who any of these players are, they have to teach them a brand new system. But hey, you're bringing basically your entire team over. So not only do they already know the system, Vegas are teaching the other players the system too. So that is a huge advantage. West Virginia, Rich Rodriguez, we all saw that coming a mile away once West Virginia fired their head coach. And yeah,
Yeah,
it makes sense. Perfect fit. I think that's a great fit for them. He's come around the world and back again to get back to West Virginia. But honestly, he's learned a lot, right? That Jacksonville State team literally making an FCS team to one of the best FBS teams in their conference. Just what an insane turnaround. And
yeah,
Southern Miss, though, okay, yeah, Charles Huff coming there, okay, he was doing some things at Marshall, that's good, and he won the conference championship, that's good, but that's a tough rebuild there. That is, that's a multi-year. This is not just okay, here we go. I mean, you basically strip the team for parts, so that's something. But I don't know. There's just so much just bad on that team that I don't know how you can maybe let's see. I'm intrigued to see how it goes. But man, just what a the team has just been absolutely pounded the last couple of years.
yeah. And I don't know if you were, but that was one of my top players was Southern Miss under. God, it was a ridiculous number, like 4.5 wins. That was ridiculous. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'll put it this way. I think I'm more bullish even immediately than you are on that. But we'll talk about that more in the Sun Belt preview. This next group, I don't even want to say I like these hires, but they're to be determined for me both, just because I think there's immediate upside. Zach Kitley at FAU, the former Western Kentucky OC, and then I don't know how you say his name, just Dowell Logains, the offensive coordinator at South Carolina at App State. I have no feeling whether these will work because these are two first time head coaches. I like both of these because FAU, if I look at basically a bunch of the bad hires, a lot of the American over here. So you've got like a head start on a lot of this mess. There just needs to be. Kitley brought his quarterback, Caden or Hayden Veltkamp, with him as well. So I can see a path really quick to being above the bottom right away in a conference that's got a big slug of bad teams at the bottom. App State, similarly, I this is for recording, but geez, Georgia Southern is way overrated. I've seen, I don't, Phil Steele has them like first or second in the Sun Belt East. I don't think they're that good. Just like last year, not that good. I think that App State, and it's not just Georgia Southern, that just speaks to the whole vacuum in the East behind JMU and maybe Old Dominion. So I don't know if this guy's going to be a good head coach or not, but basically he doesn't have to do much to be like third place in that division. So to be determined, but I think just right away there's a path for both of these teams.
Yeah, I would say so for FAU, and again, I will clarify here that with my company, we do some work with FAU, so I do have some ties to that university. But yeah, that's cool. But anyways, No, so for FAU, the head coaching hire of Texas Tech's OC, that's Zach.
Texas, sorry, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Texas
yeah, yeah.
Tech, Zach Killy. But no, the thing is, it's interesting because he's been the offensive coordinator for Texas Tech for the last, I guess, 3 years, 22 to 24. But before that, he was the offensive coordinator for Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
And if you remember correctly, the quarterback who he was the offensive coordinator for was Bailey Zappi. And if
Exactly.
people
Yeah.
remember that season in 2021, that was a ridiculous. That was when he was like throwing for 500 yards a game. And now that got Bailey Zappi into the NFL, and he was actually for some reason at some points the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots. But that's like that's how insane that was. That was one of the most offensive, like most pass heavy, most offensive explosion teams I've ever seen. And now he's a head coach. So that's actually pretty exciting. And again, FAU has not been particularly great on offense the last couple of years. They've been ish on defense, but not good on offense. This will now be the change for them. They've had some issues with quarterbacks and stuff, but again, this is an immediate change, and that should be a very positive change for them. And the App State hire, I think that's pretty good. I think the Sun Belt again is not a particularly difficult conference. We didn't like the head coach for App State for the last couple of years, and I think replacing them in many can only go up in that way. Yeah.
Yep. All right, the next group I'm a little bearish on here. I think that these are probably more popular with the fans of the program than me. Belichick at North Carolina is the obvious one that seems to be the universal wise guy fade, if you will.
God, this is going to be like the longest ACC preview. There's going to be like 2 hours of ACC preview.
It is. I don't know, not really a controversial take here, but I'm not a fan of Scott Frost, and I just don't see. Central Florida is in a very different spot now than when he was last. And not to pick on Bowling Green, but this just fits in that they hired Eddie George, Ohio State Heisman Trophy winner, I believe. He was okay, good at Tennessee Tech. One thing that we're seeing is there's a lot of FCS guys that are being promoted now that would not have been before. And I think the dynamic, just to make this really quick, your G5 programs are such a financial disadvantage that you're seeing coaches just leave just to take other positions, not being fired. Scott Loeffler left Bowling Green to be to coach, I think, quarterbacks for the Eagles. Year before, you had Mo Linguist leave Buffalo to go coach at, I think, Alabama. You just have guys just leaving, not because they're fired, just don't want to be head coach at a G5. There's more vacancies than we really would have, and you're accelerating. There's too much hiring coming from the FCS that for guys that aren't ready. And I think that's an example here. I hope he works out great. Seems like a good dude. Bowling Green needs all the love that they get playing in that conference. But I just think that these are more popular with fans of those programs than I like.
Yeah, so a couple of things. So, North Carolina, obviously, this was the insane part of the offseason. This was one of the biggest news things for the offseason. And there's so much kind of noise around Bill Belichick and his girlfriend and all this stuff. And my take on Bill Belichick is probably very unique. And people, if you watch ESPN and all that stuff, it's going to sound very different than those takes. But I like Bill Belichick is a very good coach. 100% one of the best football coaches of all time. All stop. Like sentence stop. That's it. One of the best coaches, 100%. Led multiple Super Bowls. Yes, a lot of that was Tom Brady, 100%. But still, though, a very good coach. And you can even see that in the last couple of years post Tom Brady, where his teams went like basically he had like teams that were basically 500 playoff contention, actually made the playoffs a couple times, and they had no business being playoff contenders based on the stats of the team and the team composition. They had no business even remotely getting close to the playoff, yet somehow they were still winning games. Not only just winning games, covering spreads. Like these teams were not remotely competitive, and yet somehow they were competitive. So that's a lot of that is on Belichick, so that's fine. The problem is, and this is why I'm also a fade on North Carolina as well. The problem is that Bill Belichick, when he was the head coach of the Patriots, there was no GM of the New England Patriots. There was no general manager. He did all roster moves. And the problem is in the NFL, yeah, whatever. You can find NFL players and you can sign them. And yeah, this is a massive list. It's called free agency of NFL players. And the thing is, in the NFL entry draft, he would always go off book. He'd draft someone in the first round that other people had on like round 3 or round 4 or something like that. And Usually that didn't work out. He was completely unable to draft wide receivers. They never were able to draft even a remotely half decent wide receiver the entire time he was the head coach. Linemen, he'd take random shots on linemen that were like in the third or fourth round and stuff like that. The problem is that I think roster construction in college football is even more important than in the NFL. I think it's not
Oh
too
yeah.
difficult to find an NFL lineman. Are they a good NFL lineman? No, but they're an NFL caliber lineman. But if Belichick starts saying, I like this random kid from this high school and this kid shouldn't even, this is the problem, is the fact that he is able to coach players to be the best players that they can be. But the problem is if he is, I think fundamentally in college, like the reason you're able to get the best players in the NFL is because they've functionally been weeded through in college. And I think basically every team takes shots at random players, and sometimes they pay off and sometimes they don't. And I think that basically at best, even the best schools in terms of like how many times do we hear about this 5-star quarterback is a great recruit and then we never hear from him about him in college football? How many times is that this is amazing 5-star wide receiver and we never hear about them again? That happens so often. And now you're putting Bill Belichick, who already has extremely questionable taste in roster construction, and you're like, go nuts on where there's so many just landmines just waiting for you to step on. And this is the thing. I think his best year at North Carolina will be his first year. And then it's just going to go continually downhill from there.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah.
So, also Scott Frost, that's insane. I have no idea what they're doing. That's insane. I don't know who thought this was a good idea. That's just an insane thing to do. And that will blow up massively. Yes, you had that one season with Scott Frost, and you did very well, but you were also in a G5 school at that time. So great,
Yep.
Scott Frost, when he's a coach, can beat up a bunch of G5 schools. Great, you're in the Big 12 now, and basically Scott Frost spent 4 years in Nebraska getting crushed by the basically not good members of the Big 10 that are functionally equivalent to Big 12 members, and he couldn't beat them. And now you're like, yeah, let's have him play that every week. No, that's insane. That this was a horrible idea. I have no idea why they did this. This was just a bad idea.
Robert, I'm not clear here. Do you like that or not? I want to look up something really quick. I'm just curious if the team that I like, no, they miss them. They do not play. Let's pick up their schedule here. 'Cause I'm thinking like this could be, not to spoil. I haven't even done my numbers for the Big 12, but UCF has grabbed my attention as a possible under a season win total here. Oh, interesting. I didn't know this. UCF and North Carolina play in Week 4.
Wow.
Okay. So they get Kansas State, Kansas. Yeah, they have an easy slate in conference. They miss Arizona State. They get Phil Steele likes Baylor. Yeah, they get like an average conference schedule here. So that'll be, yeah. We'll see about Scott Frost. Okay, we'll discuss him robustly in the Big 12 preview. So these five I've grouped in that basically I've just in the category of different story from last stop. Barry Odom, I'm kind of like the last truther of Marcus Arroyo, was actually moving that program forward at UNLV when they fired him. Now Barry Odom completely took it to the next level, and God bless him for that. Great job there. I dare say that Purdue is in a much worse spot in the Big Ten than UNLV was when Barry Odom took over for Marcus Arroyo. UNLV almost made a bowl, and they lost their starting quarterback for 4 games that season. Ironically, UNLV also on this is Dan Mullen. Mullen, when he took over at Florida, he took over for Will Muschamp, who was an ideal guy to take over from in that he was a great recruiter and an absolute moron. Not surprisingly, that out of nowhere, Shane Beamer has had success at South Carolina too after taking over for Will Muschamp. Too much fluidity. You're not having the same kind of stacked roster that he inherited at Florida that he does at UNLV. I think they're probably in the top part of the conference, but it's not Florida level caliber and definitely not the same kind of quarterback. Anthony Colandrea, who we love, is going to be the starter there, but that's not the same as what he had at Florida. Utah State, Bronco Mendenhall. Boy, oh boy. Last year he had Devin Dampier at New Mexico. This year he has Bryson Barnes, who you might remember was like, remember a couple years ago when he was hurt every year? Cam Rising was out and the pig farmer took over for him. That's Bryson
Yeah.
Barnes. That's his quarterback. That's a rough one. Charlotte, Tim Albin goes from Ohio to Charlotte. Biff Poggi just absolutely, he took over a bad program and made it worse. Albin took over from Frank Solich at Ohio. at a program that was regressing, had regressing a little bit. It was more just a rebuild year when he took over at Ohio, but it was nowhere near in the shambles that Charlotte was. And Temple, Casey Keeler, he had a lot of success at Sam Houston at the FCS level. Rough first season, as we anticipated. Definite step forward in year two, and man, he is starting from ground zero at Temple. Temple was just horrible last season.
Yeah, I think of Temple and Charlotte were and Purdue were definitely in trouble. And I think Dan Mullen at UNLV, that could be interesting as well. Utah State, though, it's funny with Mendenhall. Does he just continually go from like worst team in this conference to worst team in a slightly better conference? Eventually, he's gonna take over. Oh, he's gonna be like, all right, let's take over the worst team in the Sun Belt. It's like we're just gonna then the ACC, and then eventually he's gonna be like, oh, some SEC team got like nearly relegated. Let's take on that team. It's like what like just slowly building their way back up. Could he not have gotten a better job than Utah State? But it's okay. But no, he really surprised me last year. He did a lot better than any spread expectation for sure. How many times were we on something like New Mexico State plus 17 and a half, and they almost won that game? Or New Mexico, it's not New Mexico State. New Mexico. It's insane. It was insane how good that team was and how fun that team was. I remember staying up very late at night watching that team just score points at will against teams that were like good, and it's crazy.
Washington
It's
State, remember
yeah,
and John like peak John Mateer Washington State. It wasn't like a bad Washington State team.
no, yeah, and it's if you could do that with nothing, like one of the worst teams, you take one of the worst teams in FBS and you make them a fun team to watch. Again, you still don't have resources, but you have, I guess, more resources, somewhat more resources.
Yeah, and just to skip ahead a little bit, I think there's a lot more commitment at Utah State than at New Mexico, and I think he'll do fine in a couple years. It's just Bryson Barnes at quarterback is a deal lender for me, man. That's it for me. All right, next group I call suspects remain at large because I honestly think that these programs have somebody that's actually trying to murder these programs. Rice has just been run so poorly forever. Tulsa, I don't think they should have fired Phil Montgomery, and then hiring Wilson was just dumb beyond belief and predictably did not work out well. And Marshall, it's unbelievable. They Whoever's in charge there, it sounds like it's a lot of forces beyond just the athletic director. They fired a really good coach in Doc Holliday. Charles Huff finally gets it together, and literally, he could not wait to get out of there. I think he went to Southern Miss the day after he won the Sun Belt Conference title game. These guys are trying, but just ineptitude.
Yeah, a lot of these programs are just suspect. It's just like, why do you keep hiring same questionable? Like with a lot of the other ones, like FAU, like they've been trying to make hires as, oh, this guy could be undervalued, and we'll try to do that. But with some of these, when you're just hiring like retreads or like an FCS coach that shouldn't be upgraded to an FBS coach, it's the same. There are smart ways to do it, and then there's less smart ways to do it, and some of these programs just seem to continue to do the less smart option.
Yeah, and I'm not going to get to the coaches here because it doesn't matter because they need to prove that they can overcome the ineptitude of the administrations there. Last group, I just call poverty trap in that they're never going to hire a good coach. I mean, if they do, it won't last. Most recent example here is New Mexico, as we just talked about. Bronco Mendenhall had one good season. He said, "Thank you. I'm going to Logan, Utah now. Thank you very much." UMass just, I don't know. Ball State was just so bad for so long. I have no reason to think that they're going to do any better. Kent State, I don't know if you saw this. Apparently, I might get this wrong. Apologies if I did, but apparently, like their coach Kenny Burns was involved in like credit card fraud or something. Or he had like just insane amount of credit card debt, and he got fired right before spring practice. And so they just, of course, Kent State has no money. They promoted the offensive coordinator because their offense was like the worst in all of college football. So why not? New Mexico, we just touched on, hey, one good season. So, of course, that guy's out of town because they're a poverty program. They're never going to have the resources. I think Sam Houston, I'm just saying that just the fact that Casey Keeler left for Temple is a really rough sign. I don't know if they're financially really ready to be an FBS program. FIU just has never realized its place in the college football universe. Not that they were great, but I think I don't know. Will they? Is this guy going to be better? Like he was at Florida A&M. He's in a like Eddie George. He was like good, but not. Oh my God, this guy's got to be in the FBS. I don't think he'll do any better than Mike McIntyre. And Kennesaw State, we talked about them enough last season. They got a new coach, and I don't know. Did you see any reason to think that team is going to do anything right at this level?
No, and it's funny, right? Because it's like Sam Houston State came up from FCS to FBS, fire their coach the first year. Kennesaw State come up, fire their head coach the first year. Looking at you, Missouri State. Looking at you, Delaware State. We'll talk about you later. Or not Delaware State, Delaware, sorry.
Delaware, yeah,
The difference between Delaware and Delaware State. We will talk about them later. But no, it augurs poorly. The only one who pulled it off was James Madison and Jacksonville State. So they did not fire their head coaches. But after those successful ones, there is just now a trail of blood, as it were, from those last two. So we'll have to see if that trend continues or not. But yeah, I will say that with some of these coaches, at least some of these schools, I think they're realizing that if we don't do this now, it's never going to happen. If we don't get to FBS now, like there's
yeah.
already such a disparity between the top of FBS and even the middle of FBS that like if you're sitting in FCS, you can't even begin to think of the middle part. Like I think some of these schools are realizing that there's going to be a breakaway, and there's going to probably be FBS is going to split into two divisions, and then if you think you're in the second division, you're going to find yourself in the third division before too long. So I think they're realizing that they have to either, and I think some of them have just accepted their fate. I think others are like, no, if we're gonna do this, we got to do it now, and that's why you're seeing some of the ones like Montana and North Dakota. They're thinking of getting into, I think, the Mountain West after the Mountain West was rated by the Pac-12 and all this other stuff. So I think you're starting to see where they're like, okay, it's do or die now. Either do this now or we're never getting out of here.
They're going to make it tougher to get into. Sacramento State, another team that's looking to do that. They're trying to get into the Pac-12, Pac-10, whatever the Pac is. Former UNLV offensive coordinator is the head coach there, and they actually got a commitment from a 4 or 5 star wide receiver there. So that's interesting. I think Brendan Marion, like I said, been saying for a while, he's got a very bright future. Going to be the first head coach at an FBS program with a neck tattoo. Good for him. All right. I want to look back at the 2024 most important head coach moves. This is straight from last year's pod, and I think, what's crazy is I was pretty accurate here. The headliners, that's really expressing no opinion. Sooner than you think. I went 4 out of 5 here. San Diego State just didn't have a quarterback at all. Possibly headed south in a hurry. UCLA did okay. Boy, Oregon State was bad. New Mexico State was among the absolute worst. South Alabama took a big step back, and Mississippi State, they won 2 games last year. I was really bearish on them. In the interesting storylines, even though Fran Brown became Syracuse made a bowl last year, I believe. They did, yeah. And even more of an interesting storyline. Bryant Vincent way overachieved it at UL Monroe. We'll talk about that in an upcoming episode. And boy, UTEP disappointed, but that was a weird team to watch. They really just shot themselves in the foot in 3 straight games. I don't know. Anything stand out to you about last year's predictions here?
No, I think we had a pretty good call there in a lot of these, right? Especially Indiana, James Madison. We were higher on those ones, and that was proven correct. Texas A&M, we liked that higher, and Mike Elko there was, I think,
Yeah.
basically beating Texas away from the SEC championship game. So that's definitely an improvement, right? That's the thing, and again, just speaks to how deep and difficult that SEC is, right? It's just that is how crazy this is. It's okay, you think you're good, you have another team that's one loss away, right? That's the thing. So and Michigan, I underrated Michigan. Now I'm a bit high on Michigan. Maybe I'm overreacting a bit. I think Alabama, we liked it, but I think we all said that at the time it's okay, they're good, but they're not that good, and that basically was where they were. They looked better at the beginning, but then they tapered off there with the losses there to Oklahoma that really hurt them and cost them. All in all, like we had some really good calls there, and we'll see what happens this year. But yeah, I mean, at this point, our process for how we evaluate hires, I think, is pretty strong. We look at it sounds crazy, but we look at track record of success. I know, right? Nothing anybody else would ever look at, right? But like you look at track record of success, how hiring that type of coach has worked in the past, has worked or not worked, and basically just whether or not we like that coach, and whether or not we like that coach is determined on we've seen them coach before, cough, cough, Scott Frost. Do they cover the spread? Do they like fundamentally, if we've seen the coach before, do we think that the team was better because of them, or better in spite of them, or worse because of them? And for some of those people, cough, Scott Frost, it was worse because of them. So this is the
Yeah.
thing where it's like with a lot of these, it's just okay, like we have opinions on these people and it's formed by data. It's not just, hey, like that guy cut me off in traffic one time. It's like we have informed opinions about these guys for reasons, and that forms how we think about this. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to have a separate episode coming up before too long with our guy Duck about new head coaches or head coaches at new programs this upcoming season. All right, the most important coordinator moves to me. I put these in order of importance here. Ohio State's replacing both coordinators. Might recall Brian Hartline. He was the offensive coordinator in 23 at Ohio State, and not a lot of Ohio State fans were happy with the quarterback play. I'll just say that. That was when Kyle McCord became not a very popular guy in Columbus. I think he was a little unjustly maligned, but my opinion. Matt Patricia, I'm not sure what to think about this. Being a defensive coordinator under Bill Belichick is interesting in that you don't know how much is Belichick and how much was that's where Patricia was a DC that with success. He's not a head coach here at Ohio State. He was a horrible head coach, is my understanding, in the NFL.
Yes.
And he's stepping in for the best defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, who went to Penn State. I don't have that. I almost consider that a wash, him for Tom Allen. Tom Allen was so good at Penn State. So any feelings on the Ohio State situation here for coordinators?
It sounds insane that you're saying, oh, the team that won the college football playoff is like a massive regression candidate this year, but like they lost a quarterback, lost a couple other pieces. They didn't lose everything, but I don't like these hires. I don't like their quarterback. The thing is, Ryan Day just seems to always prove us wrong on this. But it's just like they didn't have the best regular season. They found a second gear in the playoff. This is a team that lost to Michigan, lost to Oregon, barely lost to Oregon to be fair, but they did lose to Oregon. Barely beat Nebraska. Had a bit of a close call against, especially early against Indiana. And they had another close game in there too that they had no business, that shouldn't have been that close. Who wasn't there someone else they didn't they had
Yeah, they had another game that was like it was close for a half and it shouldn't have been.
yeah.
I can't remember who that was.
But that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
The reason why we weren't high on Ohio State the entire year was because of stuff like that. Of, hey, yeah, you almost lost to Nebraska for some reason. Why? This is the thing, and this is one of the reasons why we didn't pick Ohio State as the best team to win it all, and they did. So it is what it is on that. But this is the thing where Matt Patricia is just a giant red flag. I don't know why he's getting football jobs. I don't know. After Detroit, being the head coach of the Detroit Lions, and then them having to blow up the entire franchise. Now, obviously, they've been rebuilt and they're a good team now, but just
Mm-hmm.
the amount of pain he put the Lions through. And then I think he was.
You sound like personally affected by this one. This is good.
Yeah, and then I want to say he was on the Chargers at some point too, but I could be wrong on that. But just again, it's just no, he wasn't in the Chargers. No, that was another. That was I think it was Anthony Lynn, or no, I'm thinking someone else. But oh no, Patricia was the Giants defensive coordinator for some reason. He was
That
brought in
sounds
with
right.
Joe Judge. Yeah, Joe Judge brought him in. And again, this is he goes somewhere and then he gets people fired, and then for some reason now he's back as the offensive coordinator, the reigning national champion. It's just like, and again, this is the thing: he replaces the best defensive coordinator in college football. Can he be the best defensive coordinator in college football? No.
Yeah.
That's
The counterpoint, he's not going to get Ryan Day fired either, though. Okay.
if you lose to Michigan and you don't make the playoffs, right?
Okay. We'll see.
If Ohio State goes 9-3 and doesn't make if they go 9-3, lose to Michigan and don't make the playoffs, are you like Matt Patricia will get fired? But are you 100% sure Ryan Day is safe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even at a crazy place like Ohio State.
He'd be
If
safe,
it happened
but Matt
3 years
Patricia
from now, then maybe all bets are off.
he would be safe, and Matt Patricia would 100% be fired. That's going to be
Yeah.
like that GIF where like you try to get in the door and the door's locked. That's that GIF. But no, yeah. Again, like maybe we take Ohio State for granted. Like maybe they're not going to be that good this year. This could be a bit of a rebuilding year for them. I mean, it's crazy. They could probably have another first round wide receiver like they always do, but maybe they could be in a bit of a progression candidate here.
Yeah. Yeah. I did then have them, to your point, I think I had them as one of the luckier teams in the country last year too, Ohio State. Interesting. All right, next couple here. We talked about Ben Arbuckle. Just I want to say that he actually built up Cam Ward. Cam Ward, people just forget Cam Ward was really not that good his first season at Washington State. Then Arbuckle comes in, builds him up to what he was. He goes to Miami and was a Heisman finalist, fighting as he needed to against Mario to have a good offense. And then Mike Shula comes in as South Carolina. I talked about Joel Logains going to App State. Boy, this is talk about not getting the pulse going here. So I've got two contrasts here with Arbuckle, who I love, and bringing in an awesome quarterback. Then you have Mike Shula, who I'll just say I need to be convinced he's replacing a really good OC in Logains, and he has an awesome quarterback to work with in Sellers. So two very different situations here.
Yeah, I think it's like there is some positive signs for Oklahoma, right? You have was really good with Cam Ward there at Washington State. You got John Mateer now. Maybe you could do something, right? It's not easy, but maybe you could do something, right? Same thing with South Carolina, right? That offense should be pretty fun, right? Lamar Sellers probably going to be one of the better quarterbacks in all of college football next year. But again, this is just again highlighting the depth of the SEC. It's like Florida, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, Texas, South Carolina. Like it's just like you have to at any week be playing any one of these teams that are like good, right? And it's just you have to beat like six of them, right, to do this. You have to beat six good teams. Whereas in the Big Ten, you only have to beat like two out of the three good teams you play, right? That's the thing. And the other teams you play are not that good, right? So it's they're intriguing hires, but like it's going to be really difficult to get out of the SEC unless you're even to the top team. I think it's going to be the SEC is going to be just an absolute meat grinder there. It's going to be like teams that probably should have gotten through are not going to get through, and teams that will get through probably shouldn't have gotten through. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. All right. The next couple here, Gus Malzahn and Tony White, new offensive and defensive coordinators. Malzahn just absolutely crushed our models last year. He just absolutely fooled us both all of the season. And then Tony White has been an excellent defensive coordinator at San Diego State and Syracuse and Nebraska. So I think I love the hire of White by I left one off here by Norvell. Malzahn is interesting. He's on baseball. They say he's a quadruple A player, like he's better than triple A, but he's not really a major leaguer. I think that Gus Malzahn is that in terms of like he's a really, really good offensive coordinator. And what I'm interested to see is him with Thomas Castellanos there at quarterback, a guy that can run like him. That could turn out to be anything. That's a complete wild card.
yeah.
After Norvell officially has the "you sucked so bad you have to fire both coordinators" season, I think he made two really good hires here.
I would say that for 100% for both of these. And again, he hired them, but there clearly was input from the university on these as well. And I would say that there is no way that Malzahn or White didn't take this job knowing that there was a chance that if this didn't work out, they'd be the head coach at the end of the year. And I think that has to be part of the calculus here for taking this job, like 100%. No, they're good hires. Malzahn could be very interesting. Again, I have no idea. Oh, sorry, it's getting late here.
Yes, it
But
is.
yes, but no, this thing, I have no idea what they like. Our models were completely fooled by the UCF there on both the positive and the negative. Like we were undervaluing them, and all of a sudden we were massively overvaluing them, and then they just massively underperformed, especially in the running game. We had them as one of the best running teams, and then they just decided to just not run. They forgot how to run the football, and this is the thing. So I'm still trying to figure out what happened there. But to be fair, the Florida State can only get better after whatever that was last year. That was one of the worst seasons by a team ever of college football, and again, that includes like Kennesaw State and Sam Houston State, right? So it's difficult to be that bad that you only beat an FCS team, and I think it was relatively close comparatively, if I'm not mistaken.
Well,
But
they also
no,
beat Cal, or
yeah, oh no,
sorry, Florida
they
State.
beat yeah, Florida State beat Cal, right? Yes,
Yeah,
but barely, and they only barely lost to they barely lost a couple of games. So if you're like Memphis was one of them, and Memphis wasn't even particularly that great last year either.
yeah,
So if
yep,
you're able to just marginally improve, you can easily get to 6, 7, 8 wins. Can you win the ACC? I don't know, but can you at least right the ship and not look horrible? Like, that's definitely a possibility, right? So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All right, next couple here. Dana Holgerson at Nebraska. He actually took over play calling for when they played my Trojans, and they looked a lot better. Now, I wouldn't sleep on this because let's remember Dylan Raiola was there. Dylan Raiola was not awesome last year, but he looked a lot better under Holgerson once he took over. Different situation. Jason Beck goes to Utah. Interesting. He goes with Devin Dampier for New Mexico, who is dynamic but not a great thrower of the ball. So two different situations. I think they're both good moves. What do you think?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I already have Nebraska, Utah to win the Big 12. I grabbed that already at a much better price than it is now. So I do Utah. I think they'll be better than last year again now that you have an actual answer quarterback rather than maybe Cam Rising will be not sick this year. Should improve a lot. Nebraska is the interesting one though. And it's we liked them last year, and they performed better. That was one of their better years, but it felt like they underperformed. It still was a bit of a disappointment for Nebraska because they came close to taking out Ohio State. They couldn't. They came close in a lot of these other games. They looked amazing in some of the games in early season, and they just destroyed Colorado and stuff. They looked amazing in some of these games, but they just couldn't finish it off. And I even say that for some of these, for this is where the Big Ten will be very interesting, and like Nebraska is going to be there, Michigan is going to be there, Oregon is going to be there, Ohio State should be there. I think. Um,
Led
like
by Matt Patricia. Go ahead.
yeah,
Yes.
that's concerning, but yes, like they should be there. I could see the case for 5 or 6 teams in the Big Ten, but I don't know. The thing is, like, if Nebraska can improve on offense, and again, that was Dylan Raiola's first year. Technically, I think he played a couple games like redshirt in a year, but whatever. This will be now his kind of like another full year. He'll have more games under him. If you get a better offensive coordinator, another full year of building, another full year of strong recruitment, this team could do something, right? The Big Ten has a lot of question marks, and we're not going to get so far into the Big Ten, but I like Nebraska is only a couple pieces away from being a legitimate team, and I think people forget that. And I think there
Hmm.
might be some value. Like there's a lot of teams that I'm seeing people are overlooking, and there's teams people are overvaluing, and like Nebraska is one, Michigan is one. Those are teams that I think people are undervaluing, and I think just in general people are overvaluing. I think just the entirety of the SEC, but we'll get to that later. But yeah.
Yeah. Big Ten preview is going to be a two-parter, and for good reason. There's like a lot to chew on there. Okay, last two in this list. Boy, this is really important to me. I've never heard of Nate Potter. I guess he was the tight end coach or whatever, taking over at Boise State as at OC. I think this is so important because yeah, he was the tight end coach. I'm convinced that Dirk Cutter was the head coach last year, no matter what. And I just a really good coach, and they overperformed. Pretending that Spencer Danielson was the head coach. I think now Spencer Danielson is actually the coach here. So I think this is important for different from the surface reason. And then Jim Zabrowski, who's been an assistant, I guess, for a while for Leipold at Kansas, he comes in. Jalen Daniels is still at Kansas, believe it or not, and Jeff
Mm-hmm.
Grimes just was not a good fit there. So I'll be interested to see if this guy can get Jalen Daniels back to what Jalen Daniels was, and not the 2024 bum list Jalen Daniels.
Yeah, this is another one, and again, this is where I say the Big 12 is just so. If you're, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not loving just like saying, okay, like I'm not going in and just saying, okay, we're gonna bet on Arizona State, especially not at 5-1, because it's like, hey, if they catch Jalen Daniels on a hot streak, or if they catch, or they have to play Kansas State at home, or maybe Iowa State's good, like he could be the best coach, but it's just the fact that if any of these teams is good on any one given week, his team is not that much better than that team. And I think that's the thing. It's like there is a lot of pitfalls in the Big 12, and that's why that conference is a meat grinder. It's going to cannibalize itself. The winner's going to have 2 or 3 losses, right? The question is, which team is it going to be? And I think It could be Kansas, it could be Utah, it could be Arizona State. I think probably one of those three.
Yeah, interesting. Are you buying my Dirk Cutter theory?
I think so. Yeah, we'll have to see, right? If Boise State absolutely implodes this year, which like they definitely could, then the thing is, people are going to say, "Oh, it was Ashton Jeanty. It was Jeanty. He's gone now. That's why." But it's going to be like, no, it was Dirk Cutter.
Yeah, that's an interesting read. There's a lot of kind of whatever in the Mountain West, but there's a few teams that just are pretty contentious in terms of what they could be. Also have here the eyes on the American. This is my sneakiest coordinator move. There's another one I didn't mention, which is Corey Heatherton. He went from I thought I had it on here. He went from Minnesota to Miami. Minnesota's defense was so underrated last season. They were like in my top 10 like all of last season. It's not like they have a ton of talent, and that was a really good defense. And I think it's again, Mario amazes in terms of like how much he knows when it's not the 3 hours and 10 minutes on a Saturday when he's actually coaching. He does so well at everything else, and just a brilliant hire. And that's what they needed. But anyways, we'll talk about that in the lengthy ACC preview. But the biggest one that I love that is probably going to inform one of my larger season total win bets is in the American. So stay tuned to that. I am all in on one team, not to win the American, but I love one team based specifically on a coordinator hire they made. Are you intrigued? Do you have any idea? Who I'm talking about? Probably
No,
not.
I'm
Okay.
curious about this. Yeah.
And once I sell it to you, you're gonna buy it. Isaiah, not that Isaiah's not doing that one, but Isaiah's gonna buy it too. I'll just say that. All right, last little bits and pieces here. Conference realignment, like talked about Delaware and Missouri State going to Conference USA. UMass back to the MAC where they should have been. It was dumb that they ever left. And then Oregon State and Washington State, they play each other twice in November, and they're out of that Mountain West scheduling agreement they had last year, so they don't have that whole, what I think they each played like 6 teams in the Mountain West last season, if not 7. Washington State's got a tricky little schedule. It's tough. These are like sometimes if you're an independent, you wind up taking some tough games just to fill in rough spots. And when other teams want a breather, I think that's what Washington State is looking at here.
Yeah, I mean it's so again the Delaware and Missouri State. Those are the two new FBS teams this year. Those are in Conference USA, so that's another two teams to Conference USA, and we will get to see those in midweek CUSA midweek action Tuesday and
Yes.
Wednesday and Wednesday night CUSA, which are great. Absolutely love those. That starts in October, if I'm not mistaken. So that's looking forward to that. That's pretty exciting. UMass to the MAC. This is like a preemptive replacement for Northern Illinois, which is leaving for some reason. I'm still not sure exactly why they are leaving, or if they are leaving right next
Yeah, I
year.
think they're going to
Yeah,
the Mountain West.
yeah, which is not when I think of Illinois. I don't think of mountains. So that's yeah. I definitely don't think of mountains, and I definitely don't think of west. So they're northern Illinois, but not that northern. At least not that north. So yeah, that one's curious to me. I guess they get more money, marginally more money, but
Yeah, definitely.
okay. I mean, if that's the only, I mean, college football is about money, but okay. Was Kusa not available? Was the Sun Belt? You're still not Sun Belt, but you're definitely not Mountain West. Like,
It's more money. It's more money. They have a better TV deal by far than the MAC. I'm going to be interested to see. I don't know how it plays. Maybe it's actually maybe it's good for recruiting in that you can get guys from a different region, and you can get some of the good guys in the Midwest by saying, "Hey, we get to play." Who's left in that weird conference? Who'd they keep? They kept UNLV. You get to get okay. I think they picked up New Mexico, or they kept New
State.
Mexico.
They kept New Mexico. They picked up New Mexico State
Yeah,
from conference
yeah.
Kusa. Yeah.
What would you rather do in November? Would you rather play a Wednesday night game at Eastern Michigan in front of 5,000 people who don't want to be there because it's 30 degrees? Or would you rather play in Las Cruces or Albuquerque? I know my answer.
That is true. That is true. Yeah, you wouldn't want to play in a snow game in front of 5,000 people in like Eastern Michigan or Buffalo or something like that.
Yeah, I wonder if Phil would actually fly to Hawaii. That would be an interesting question too, huh?
There you go. They're like, okay, we're gonna join the Mountain West just so we can go to Hawaii every other year and
That would
play
be
on
interesting.
that Spectrum Sports app thing or something.
Yes. Missouri State kicks off their FBS tenure by playing at USC, my Trojans. So welcome to the big time, guys. You'll enjoy that.
Yeah.
All right. And lastly, some college football media news that I picked up just in the recent offseason. Bruce Feldman, great reporter. I like him on Fox, good podcaster. Not a great analyst, I'll put it that way. That's where it falls apart for me, but like his work in general. Don't know if you've heard of this book he wrote about Leach, Swing Your Sword. Have you heard about this? I
No,
haven't read it, but he references it a lot. I'm going to read it at some point, but I heard him just recently. This is so great. He had a working title for this book that was something other than Sing Your Sword. Now, Swing Your Sword is obviously his reference to the pirate and all that about Mike Leach.
Mhm.
And the working title of the book, he said, was something that was a quote that he got from Mike Leach early on when he was like researching the book. And that quote was, this is unbelievable. This is so Mike Leach. And this is where we're going to end. That quote was, I'm convinced everyone wants to see a big fat guy naked. That was,
Yeah.
that's Mike Leach, everybody. And that's, I can totally, how is it? It's awesome. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised are you? I'm guessing like 0.5 that Mike Leach said that.
No, not surprising at all. Yeah.
Yes. So had to share that. That's too good not to share. Working
Yeah.
title for the book. Unfortunately, did not make the final cut. So with that, one final thing. Unfortunately, the great Brock Heward, who I love, my favorite analyst. Apparently, I heard he's not going to be back. He's doing the whole spending time with family. We'll see who replaces him with Jason Benetti. So we probably need a new graphic here. But Robert, it was great to shake off the rust and talk college football just like old times. I appreciate your time, and a couple more episodes coming up soon with our guy Duck. Thank everyone for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.
Yep. See everybody.